Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for everybody who has come here today. Uh, just after, and wishing you all a very, very happy new year. I hope everything is good. And
While we wait, maybe I'll start with a
oh,
question for you. Um, so, while doing this film, you must have traveled quite a bit and seen different black buck populations. So, one thing very interesting about black buck antelope is that they are a wonderful species with which to try and understand how animals navigate very different kinds of environmental conditions, because they are found across a wide latitudinal range within India. So you see them all the way from, in Rajasthan, in Haryana, Uttar Pradesh, all the way down to Tamil Nadu. And because of that, you can actually try and understand, as conditions change, how do animals cope. So I think my what I wanted to ask you about was your impressions when, say, you travel to places, say, in the northern range versus the southern range. Your impressions on how groups were changing, or the kind of ecological conditions even within the grassland systems. Any thoughts that you had on that?
very interesting. You asked me that question is because like you have extensively worked on the black box. One thing that I certainly noticed. So the film was mostly shot in Bidar in North Karnataka. So it was something that we hadn't thought about really as to where to film these animals. And as it happened to happen, we filmed in Bidar mostly. Some of it was shot in Saswad in around Pune, Maharashtra, and a lot of it also was shot in Tal Chhapar in Rajasthan. To answer your question, one thing that I saw was that while in Rajasthan, where they typically protect all of these wild animals with a lot of vigorous love for them, we saw that I don't know how many of you have actually been to Tal Chhapar in Rajasthan. So there are two parts to it. One is the protected area, and here you have the other Gomala area where you still have black bucks. So they're widespread. They're almost everywhere. They are in the national park. They're outside the national park. They're almost everywhere. I mean, there was this instance where we were just driving back from Bidar, and I was with my few of my friends in the car, and as we were entering Tumkur, near Tumkur, in the Sira area where there's some wild spaces, I was just mentioning that we might actually see black bucks even here, and then we turned, and we actually saw black bucks walk past on the near the highway. That's how many black bucks are there actually there, which we don't really know. So yes, in terms of how the species behaved or things, is like where there's very little protection, as we see in much parts of Karnataka, like in Bidar or North Karnataka, they seem to be smaller clutches as compared to say in Tal Chapar, where I think the protection is such that they can actually be in bigger groups. In fact, it is said that the Tal Chapar park itself can hold about 600 or 700 individuals, but right now there are about 5,000 individuals that call the Tal Chapar their home. So that has actually had a major role in how the group sizes. So in fact, even in Bidar, when we were filming, there were times when we filmed in a season and we went back, and that entire landscape was not non-existent. There used to be some urban development or some road or something that had come up, and the black box wouldn't be seen at all. So the group sizes had reduced certainly. And one of the other things that I saw, like we concentrated on the lick behavior, but there was another behavior that we saw that we weren't sure of, and we didn't know how to kind of portray it on the screen. So we kind of held it back to see how to kind of interpret it, maybe in a future film or something. Was that while the lake was predominant in the northern part, in Bidar and in the other places that we filmed in in southern India, we saw that the behavior change, wherein it became more of a harem system, where there used to be a black buck male, and then he would be surrounded by a lot of females, like the ones they saw where the black buck was moving through the group of females. There used to be a whole lot of females, and then they would still be moving. They would be moving from one patch to another, but there would be this sort of a territory that the male would have, and then there would be another male, say another few hundred, a few 500 meters away, and they would chase each other. So the male wouldn't tolerate the other male coming, the dominant male coming into this male's patch. And while the females would tolerate, obviously, like there would be groups, different groups, but they would mingle together, the groups. But then the males wouldn't tolerate the other males coming into their territory and to be chased off. So that's something that we saw. That I think was the difference that we really saw between North India and South India.
Just to follow up a bit on that, one thing that I think is very useful for us to think about is often with wildlife conservation, we think about how species or populations may go extinct. But another facet to think about is behavioral extinctions. And what I mean, just to explain, is the blackbuck is very unusual because, as Sumant showed in his film, it's one of very few species that show this really unusual leg mating systems. In the sense that most, deer, antelope, ungulates like this, their main way to find and get mates, there are two main ways. One is either where females are moving around in their groups looking for food, avoiding predators, and males come and try and monopolize a group of females and keep other males from this group. It's like a female defense mechanism. And then the other way is males have like a nice patch of food or water that a female needs, and females then, when they come to the resource area, to that patch, the male tries to court and convince the female to mate with him. So that's a resource defense kind of system. This leg system is neither. So the males are all congregated, as you saw, on their individual little patches, each of which is maybe, a quarter of this room. So it's really just like like a place from which the male can just display. And it's almost like, those old Swayamvara type systems, except where females have complete ownership. In the sense, a female visits this kind of ground with multiple males, almost like a male market, moves around the different males, chooses a male, that's her mate, then she leaves. So a lot of behavioral ecologists like me find the system fascinating because it provides us a way to understand what are females paying attention to. Why mate with this male and not that? Is it something to do with, say, strength and quality like that, or is it the ability to fight off disease, or is it like stamina, which can has some genetic basis? Their young could inherit it and be strong, survive better, etc. So this leg system actually provides us a way to try and understand what do females want, what are females looking for, what information are they using as they choose males. But in all of India, there are only two populations where you see this, in Tal Chapar and another population in Gujarat, in Velavadar. So it is strongly associated with how many animals are there. So animal density, when animal numbers go down, the system breaks down, and you see the other one that you talked about, the female defense, harem type system, or a resource defense. So if blackbuck numbers go down, the species will probably be fine, but we may lose these kind of rare, exciting behavioral patterns. So something for us to think about, how important are behavioral extinctions, in the light of wildlife conservation.
Yeah, in fact, I wanted to ask you that one question is like, so the drone footage that you saw of the lake was from her students' study. So they used drones to understand. So maybe you can highlight a bit on what they actually saw from the drone and how it brought about new understanding of the lake system and everything. And that will be very fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. So this is Akanksha Rathod's work. So the traditional way. So when I did my PhD on blackbuck many decades ago now, the way was you're on the ground, you're watching the animals, you're using spotting scopes, you're recording or video recordings and so on. But if you need to understand what is going on, you have about, say, in the peak mating season, you have about 100 males all interacting. You have a female, one or two coming together, moving in there, multiple females visiting. So if you want to make sense of what is going on, how are they moving, how are they interacting with each other, being on the ground is very difficult because you don't have a sense of depth. It's not very good at all. At that time, what we had was a watchtower. So from the watchtower, it was better. At least about 2/3 of the lake I could, and I used to go and map all these territories, because you have those kind of blackish marks you saw are these scent marks, these dung piles we call them. So you can see them, map them on the ground, and then observe them with your spotting scope. But still, you can't get a full picture. So what Akanksha did was very, first of its kind in India, which was to fly a drone above the lake, and then you can actually see, this male is moving here, and even 2 territories away, somebody is responding. Something like that from on the ground would have been very difficult. So now you can almost have like a social network. You can figure out this individual coming here is causing that to move away, the other one to come close by. You can actually now try and see what the network of communication and interactions is, something that wasn't possible before.
And there was also another question I had for you, was that, um, we were fortunate to have spent so much time with these animals and to see all of these different behavior and stuff. So, but then again, like when I showed you the first rushes and you said like you hadn't seen this male adorning its head with the wine and going about, or that ritualistic scene where the male came by and stood by for a long time. So what do you make of these different sets of behavior that we filmed, and what do you think about?
I think often as scientists, because we don't want to anthropomorphize, that is, put our feelings and way of thinking onto animals. So, because of that, we try our best to be as objective as possible. But sometimes I think then we simplify things a lot. So then new behaviors, when they come up, like for example, with elephants, we know that they do seem to have very strong bonds, and when one individual dies, others do seem very emotional is the word for it, I think. Um, but with antelope, I think we've not even gone there. We've not gone into studying these kind of deeper behavior. So for example, animals show a lot of play. You might have noticed this. So in the evenings, when it's kind of gets cool, while doing our studies, we notice that whichever group we seem to follow, in the evening, just when the heat is down and it's cool, all animals start playing. Even the oldest females are just jumping, racing around, interacting with each other, and we don't know what it's about. But they are doing it. It's a large part of their life. With young individuals, a lot of work has shown that play is important to learn how to navigate adulthood, just like in humans. That for young individuals has been figured out, but why should adults, run and play? What's the why should that have come about? We don't know. Similarly, they show a lot of curiosity about other species also. So I don't know if you noticed, in one frame there was a nilgai walking. That's this blue bull, another one of a really large antelope. And when nilgai calves are born, the nilgai calf is almost as big as this blackbuck adult. And it's very common, when a new nilgai calf is there and if blackbuck are around, they show a lot of curiosity towards young of other animals. So they approach them and try and figure out what's going on. They'll also run away from them because it's something very different. But again, we don't know, why do they show curiosity towards other species, which is not a predator, it's not food, it's not anything that immediately we can think of as helping them in their lives, helping them to survive. So I think there are a lot of such open questions about the richness of animal lives that we still don't understand well. And I think films like this bring it out because we tend to forget about these unusual aspects.
I mean, we were just lucky, I guess. Like, I mean, in the heat of April, when it was like 50 plus or something in Talchapa, we had a heat wave, and that is when we actually got to see this dead blackbuck, and then we stayed over to witness this whole event. So yeah, we were partly lucky as well.
Yeah, congratulations on the film and Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year to you.
Thanks.
You showed some parts where the wolf was preying, and the Indian wolf has made a comeback in the Deccan. But finally, the kill was made by the feral dogs. So, how is the Dakhni wolf generally faring in your?
Oh, they're not doing very well at all. Thank you very much for the wishes, like, and you too. Yeah, unfortunately, like, we can't really say the same for the wolves in the Deccan. Partially, it's because like much of the open landscapes of Karnataka is not under protection. Much of India's open landscapes are not under protection, and so goes the story for Karnataka as well. So at least in the years that we spent trying to film wolves or blackbucks in Bidar and in the surrounding areas, I think Koppal was the only place where we knew wolves were. But then again, what we were seeing in these landscapes is that the wolves are not hunting in packs, or they wouldn't even move about in packs. They were just either individuals, or they would be in pairs, the male and the female. And if at all, if there was a year old or something, an adolescent, that would stick with the parents. So it used to be always two or three animals in a group. There was only one occasion where we heard in Bidar that there was a group of 6 wolves that were prowling in one area, but we never got to see that. So the scene is not very great for wolves yet in Karnataka, and I hope it changes.
Just to follow up on that, the other issue I'm sure you would have come across is in the interaction with feral dogs, disease can become an issue also. And so I was curious whether you saw, because jackals are going through a similar issue. Did you encounter many jackals or calling, howling?
Oh yes, we saw a lot of jackals. In fact, we did see jackals, but it was during the time we were filming. But we were not in Saswad at that point, where we actually shot much of the wolves. But at the very same time, I think that was the first time they actually got photographs and images of dog wolf hybridization, where they saw these dog like creatures with the wolves, the part of the party. And it was seen that they could mate, and then they would give out individuals which were also not mules, but they could reproduce. So this hybridization has become a thing, and it is being noticed more and more often in the Saswat Pune area. But I'm sure if a lot more work and a lot more people happen to start working in the North Karnataka region, I'm sure we'll get to see a lot of this interactions as well. It's because we frequently saw. There were occasions where we've seen dogs chase foxes and wolves. Sorry, the jackals. But we didn't really see interactions between dogs and wolves. But given the proximity in which they are living in these landscapes, I'm sure it is happening, just that we have not noticed it.
Hi. Happy New Year, and thank you so much for sharing this incredible work with us. I had a question about the leg system. Is this something that you see that is region locked, or is this something that's like resource dependent, or like in historical evidence have you seen the same flock sort of change their breeding systems? I mean, I'd be curious to know what kind of things impact that.
So the legs are seen in several, apart from blackbuck, there are some other mammals, some bats that show legs, deer that show, some European deer that show legs, many birds, and a few insects also. It seems to be quite strongly tied with resources, in the sense that in high resource areas, animal numbers are high. So it seems to be it's a very high cost way of getting mates, because as you saw, there are a lot of fights, a lot of displays, takes a lot of energy. Animals don't eat. You can literally see them like within 2-3 weeks of being on the leg, you'll start seeing their rib cage. They're just losing weight. And so, for such a high cost way of finding mates, the benefits have to also be high. Otherwise, it would die out, this system. So, in some areas, there are some African antelope where they've shown that when numbers come down, the system changes within the same population. So, it's and blackbuck too, probably in the past, in Bidar, they might have been these really large legs, but now you see the smaller ones that you saw.
We did see a
You
few
would see,
legs,
yeah,
but very far and few between.
correct.
There
Correct. So not
wasn't.
like those
Yeah,
dense
yeah,
dal chapar ones.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Hi, thanks a lot for excellent movie and happy new year to everyone. To your first question, I'll kind of go back that what's the difference between northern and southern ranges. So I come from western part of the country. So like things like what I more interests me is has there been killing of black bucks on account of specific things, be it horns. What's the significance of horns? And yeah, like there is a famous case which happened in Rajasthan. So like how is it's going about right now? Like how much is the conservation preservation?
So horns, I think more. It depends on different parts of the country. So in some parts of the country, the horns are used as trophy. It's like a trophy item. But I don't think it's. I've only heard of very few places. Maybe you can correct me, where they've used it as medicine, the horns. But it's more trophy hunting, and meat, of course. Now, of course, the black buck is protected under the Wildlife Protection Act. So it's illegal to hunt black buck. And I think it probably does go on to some extent, but it's in control in the sense that otherwise you wouldn't see most black buck populations, such a large mammal, are outside protected areas, because as Suman's film so it showed so wonderfully, these ecosystems, you don't have large grassland protected areas, wildlife sanctuaries. You don't have those huge ones like you might have, say, um, forested protected areas. So it there is likely some hunting going on, because otherwise animal numbers would be larger, but it seems to be managed quite well and very heterogeneous in different parts of the country or different parts of the land. It might vary a lot.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I think not horns, but we did see that in the local markets in Bida, you could find these pouches and purses made out of the skin of blackbuck. So I think that probably is also something that is used, apart from, of course, the meat. So, but yeah, I mean, unless somebody actually digs deep and figures out as to what is happening. I mean, I'm sure there are occasional killings of black bucks, especially with retaliatory killings when they predate on crops, which they generally do. There's always this need. I mean, aggrieved farmer might kill. Well, I'm sure will kill. If poaching happens, maybe we don't know yet for sure, because if you're finding large amounts of pouches and purses and wallets made out of black buck in local markets, I'm sure there is something that needs to be unearthed. And also the reason is, and also the fact is that because they are so rampantly found everywhere, and because they are not restricted to a park boundary or something, it's harder for someone to kind of keep a lookout and say where and when are they poached, or if they are poached.
Okay, so wonderful film. I had few questions for you. The first one is regarding migration. So, do you observe transnational migration for black bucks? As you mentioned, you found them in northwestern India, you found them in Gujarat, in North Karnataka, and even in Tamil Nadu. So, is that a pattern, or it is just like very localized migration? Second question is regarding adaptation. So, as you mentioned, that you find these populations, these pockets in various parts of the country, and as climate change affects each and every part of the country in different ways. So, in Northwest, you have semi-arid, arid areas where you have like very little water to none at all. And then when you come down south, you have much greater availability of water. So, how does that ecological changes? How does those affect adaptation in blackbirds? Or greater animals in the grasslands. And my third question is regarding conservation. So you see in northwest part of the country, you sort of there are superstitions regarding black bucks, right? So we pray to black bucks, and larger communities do that. Do you observe that in other parts of the country? And again, beyond black bucks, in Rajasthan, I remember, if it's correct, that the Great Indian Bustard was going and extinct, I think. So are there any things going on, like to protect those and other animals in the grasslands, because they are heavily ignored? So yeah, those three questions.
Most of the questions are for Kavita, I think.
I forgot your first question. Yeah. So Blackbuck only show local movement. They don't do long distance migration. A colleague of mine who looked at the genetics of blackbuck to figure out. So if animals didn't move much, then if you look at their kind of genetic patterns, you'd find that these animals are very different genetically from, say, some even a few 100 kilometers away, because they haven't moved much and there's not much intermingling of genes and so on. But what he and his students found is, in fact, blackbuck across the country, there is a lot of similarity in their genes, and you only see some very distinctive patterns in, if I remember right, a bit in the south, a bit in the east, in the Orissa area where there's not much movement. The blackbuck are quite isolated there. So while there isn't much long distance migration, there is a lot of gene flow between populations, which means that these populations do tend to, they are finding corridors and ways of moving and ways of being connected, which is a good sign. It in the sense that imagine that animals don't do long migrations, but say if animals move and mating takes place here, and then these move elsewhere, mating takes place there, what you'd have is populations that are kind of interconnected. That's what seems to happen. But they don't have like wildebeest migration. Those kinds of migrations are not there currently today. I think some of it already Sumant mentioned. So, for example, you will see a lot of group size variation. Large groups currently you find largely in the western and northwestern populations. In the south, you might see groups up to maybe 120, 200, but say in Talchapar, you would have seen groups of 500 or 600. So you find those. We don't know, and a lot of morphological differences. The ones in the south don't have as dark a coat as the Rajasthan and Gujarat populations. So morphologically, there are some differences. We don't know about, say, diet-wise or water consumption. How that varies, we don't know much at all. And lastly was about conservation. No, what was your question, Prakon? Great Indian Bustard, yeah. So, do you want? Yeah. So there is a lot of interest now. I think because of a lot of ecologists and through citizen science, through filmmakers, and so on. There is a lot of attention now coming onto these open natural ecosystems, which our grasslands are a part of. And because of that, like the grassland restoration that was shown in the film, grassland restoration efforts are slowly coming up across the country, but a lot more needs to be done because of a history of dealing with forests. The kinds of strategies needed to keep grasslands healthy are very different. So, for example, if to protect the boundary of a grassland patch, very often what is done is trenching is done. Like you build a deep trench, so things can't, say cattle can't get in or people can't get in. That's a kind of regular measure that's done. But what that can do in a grassland is it prevents water flow. It'll change the local species that come up. Your regular grassland species will change there. Very often, if water collects, invasive species will come up there. So, the kind of work, the kind of measures needed to keep grasslands healthy are quite different from, say, historically what departments have been used to. And but there are large groups of people across different sectors now focusing attention, so that's very hopeful. So the great Indian bustard is a great example because it's like a species on the verge of extinction. We don't know whether we'll see it after 200 years. It's like on the knife edge right now. And Rajasthan, in fact, has the only large viable population in India, and there they are trying both ex situ and in situ measures. So there's a captive breeding program going on, like kind of backup in case the natural population goes extinct. Can we have individuals that can keep getting released? That's going on. Very unusual, actually, in the Indian context. Along with that, they're also trying these measures. So the same challenges Blackbuck face, Great Indian Bustard face, which is that they live in a multi-use landscape. They need huge areas, which means they live in an area where you have protected patches, you have crop lands, you have grazing lands, settlements. That's their habitat, right? So how do you conserve and manage such a multi-use landscape? Rajasthan, they're trying out things like, for example, they need areas to, when they are breeding for their nests and chicks to stay safe, they need taller grass. So, what they have done there is they have some areas where grazing is not permitted for a while. That's being used, that the animals, the birds use as their nesting habitat. They go out to feed, but other measures are needed. So, for example, there are very big birds, and when they take off, they can hit power lines and die. And one bird dying is like a bit of the population dying, because, like elephants, these are long-lived animals, and even one reproducing female that dies can bring down the whole population. So then there are measures. There's a lot of measures now being proposed to try to see if power lines can go underground, or other ways. So multiple things need to happen for something like a critically endangered species like Great Indian Bustard to to survive. And there's a big research group from Wildlife Institute of India that's focused on this, the Great Indian Bustard conservation.
Like she rightly said, like what is really important is that we start looking at conservation of grasslands and open natural ecosystems from a different perspective. And you can't say probably have black bucks contained in an area like how you had tigers in a national park or something. So how are we going to build our cities? How are we going to then manage crops, say, for instance, because these can predate crops? So there's one very good example of how a collective called Timbuktu Collective, on the way from here to Hyderabad, there's a place called Penukonda. Very close to that, there's an area where people have come together, community, and they have set up a conservation area where they have been able to successfully live alongside these animals and grow crops which the black bucks don't predate on. So, if measures of such kinds are taken, there and these are actually critical, is because you cannot contain a huge group of black bucks in an area. It is counterproductive. So to be able to then say, like, are we going to have huge swaths of grasslands or open natural ecosystems alongside our towns and cities, and how then are we going to manage these things? Like, it's a big question, and I think the initiative is already taken. Like, like there was a recent Madhu's and Abhi's paper on mapping just the open natural ecosystems and saying what do we have in India right now, what are these ecosystems and what needs to be done, like, even to understand the scope of the problem that we have and that we need to kind of start thinking about. So it has started, and I'm sure with time there's going to be that sort of an push where people will start thinking differently about conserving grasslands. Yeah, I hope. And to add on to that, one thing that you asked, if black bucks are preyed and revered upon, just like how in Rajasthan. It was very surprising that we found in Lepakshi, in the temple, you can actually see a black buck carving on one of the pillars. So I am sure there was some reference and reverence towards black buck that was shown even in this part of the world, but maybe we've lost touch of it, and we need to kind of dig deep to understand what is there. Timbuktu Collective.
Just to also mention here that in a multi-use landscape, it's really important that one then works with people also, because livelihoods are also at stake.
Hi, everyone. North of Hyderabad and also north of Bidar, about 200 kilometers north, there's this place called Sriram Sagar Project. We have had black bucks migrating from Maharashtra there. In the last 5 years, we've been hearing of them coming or being spotted. And earlier to that, even 20, 30 years ago, there were none such. A lot of migration is happening there. It's not very far from Bidar where you work. So this is something.
Oh, that's very interesting. There was I think what is really overdue is a survey of black buck across India.
So I mean, that I was wanted to ask you that question is like, so one of the things that we found was like when we were filming, when we started filming in Bidar, is that there wasn't much data available about black bucks in Bidar itself, and in fact, like there was only one paper that we found about uh, uh, any reference to natural history in Bidar at that time. So I just wanted to ask you is like where like, say for instance a tiger or an elephant has a lot of survey done and stuff, like, so what do you think, what do you propose, say for lesser charismatic species like the black bucks or the four-horned antelope or something, and in which direction should we head to like start thinking about conserving them when they're still in healthy population?
So some 30 years ago, there was, I think, an India-wide survey done for black buck, but since then we don't have. There are some initiatives we can take advantage of, which might work for some of the more forest species, like the less charismatic species in forests. They, because of the nationwide, the tiger surveys, the once in 4 year surveys, and that has actually a lot of rich information on other species that could be, caught in either the camera traps or when they are surveying for tiger and their prey. But for, say, these open natural ecosystems and so on, large scale surveys are very few. There are some, like we have. We are very lucky to have Sanjay Guppy here, whose group does large scale surveys as part of their deeper ecological work. So we have which is, I think, all of Karnataka, but also into Andhra also, or yes, 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 which is also a huge area.
It's a huge area. It's 191,000 square kilometers. So we are just finishing a 3-year study from Kalyan, Karnataka, which is 7 districts of North Karnataka. So we have very wonderful information now. Like we found dholes in Gulbarga and Bidar district, which nobody thought we could have had. And just today, 2 days ago, we recorded the sandalwood leopard, which is a new column of for leopards and the very first sighting in Karnataka. And then we have a lot of information on jackal dog hybridization, wolf dog hybridization. Jackal dog hybridization is very serious actually. And
And a lot
wolf,
of ungulates also in your surveys.
yes, we get a lot of ungulates, chinkara, blackbuck, four-horned
Four-horned
antelope.
antelope.
It's amazing to see how widespread four-horned antelope is. And but what I would also like to add is that wolves and striped hyenas, we have got wonderful data, all areas where we never thought wolves and hyenas were present. So we are working with the forest department. And also the other thing is it's not as bad as we had thought earlier about wolf distribution in Karnataka. It is just that the way how wildlife habitats are managed in the past have actually been detrimental to these species. So we don't need protected areas because we are not good at managing habitat specialists. We just try to manage everything like a tiger. One of the areas I can quote, and I have a lot of data, is from my home district in Tumkur, which is a place called Maidanalli. And a lot of it's not just the forest department which has done committed mistakes, it's also environmentalists, unfortunately. A lot of them promote tree planting. They think tree planting is the solution for everything. Everything is a wasteland. So we go on planting trees and destroying wildlife habitats, not knowing the value. So one example I would love to give is the Maidanalli in Tumkur district. In the mid 80s, late 80s, early 90s, I would see a lot of wolves there. And today I have been going back to do camera trap work in that places. I don't see wolves, but I see a lot of leopards. Wolves have been replaced by leopards because of tree planting activities, both by the forest department and the over enthusiasm of environmentalists to get it notified as a protected area. So as soon as it is notified as a protected area, there is strict control of grazing by livestock, which is not a suitable thing for blackbuck, chinkara, and other grassland species. So Maidanalli is now replaced by the protected area is replaced by cheetal, and blackbucks are outside the protected area. So we also did a study of blackbuck population there. So we estimate Maidanalli to have about 2,200 blackbuck, but all of it outside protected areas. And all the grasslands have now been converted into woodlands. So no wolves, but leopards. So we can't always continuously blame the forest department. The current day environmentalists are equally bad. CSR is extremely bad for grasslands because all of them love photo ops and they love planting trees. You know, they love planting evergreen trees in our dry areas.
Hmm. Yes, I think that, but I think with a lot more attention now coming to open natural ecosystem, the hope is that we'll get innovative ways of managing these multi-use large landscapes. And yeah, that's my hope.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kavita. Well, that is something even we don't understand, and I hope Kavita can provide us more answers. Like, so that is a behavior that we film, and we don't know yet as to what is happening there. We just saw that this male would come repeatedly to the dead animal and then walk around the animal, sniff, defecate next to her, and leave. And then he came back later in the evening when the carcass was actually dragged a few hundred meters away from where actually found, and he did he continued doing that again once more. We don't know, sir. Like, I think we leave it to the scientists to figure out. Not Not yet, but if you do have any need for taking it for conservation issues like purposes like screening it for schools or other, please reach out to us and we will provide you with the copy.
So it might sound a little dumb, but is it possible that some animals exhibit these behaviors just out of sheer boredom? Like there isn't necessarily any deeper meaning into these behaviors, but they just exhibit it. So something like that. I'm not sure, like if I'm going to frame the question properly, but yeah.
Yeah, in the sense, if I understand you correctly, we don't have to look for an adaptive reason for all behaviors. Yes. So there might be some behaviors that animals do that has no, deeper advantage, and absolutely. Just like humans, animals also can be bored at times.
So when an elephant calf dies, it becomes emotional. It even cries, right? What's the reason for this? And versus vis-a-vis, what happens when a black buck calf, or I don't know what you call a young one of a black buck? Is it because like the death of an elephant calf is more an unnatural act? Like because normally there are no predators for elephants, right? So when a calf of elephant, a young one of elephant dies, it's more like an unnatural act, like an accident or something. So it's a more rare kind of an event. So maybe they have developed more emotions because of that. Whereas a black buck is a kind of animal which is preyed upon more frequently by cheetahs or lions. So maybe they know that okay, one of our young ones is statistically going to die, because of a cheetah. So they have not developed those kind of higher emotions. Is it the reason, or I want to know as a scientist what do you?
So I think it's possible that black buck also do have these deeper bonds, because when groups move together, the young stays with the female, especially the daughters stay with their mothers almost all their lives. So they are actually a lot like elephant societies. So one thing to kind of explain is emotion, stress, etc., are kind of the immediate mechanisms that we see today because they have helped animals survive challenges. So, for example, when individuals move together, like mother daughter groups and so on, when individuals move together like that, they are better able to survive predators. They can see, because you have many more eyes, you see individuals faster. You can run away from them. There's this confusion effect. When animals run together in a group, predators find it very difficult to ID them and follow them. They can also give each other information on good foraging areas, or ways to water holes, and so on. So there are a lot of benefits to animals from being with their relatives. But that is in a kind of theoretical framework. Immediately in practice, what ensures that mothers and daughters stay together or that animals move together? And that's where mechanisms like, for example, feeling pain. Feeling pain is not great, but it helps us avoid dangers. So similarly, in animals, for example, animals where in jackals, for example, sometimes young from 1 year will help their parents bring up their younger brothers and sisters. So when the younger brothers and sisters give out calls showing hunger, if you prevent the older ones from going to their siblings, they actually get stressed. Their stress hormones go up. So you'd wonder why. Why should it do? Stress hormones going up is not good for you. But it's the mechanism that ensures that they are bringing food or keeping the younger ones safe, which has this larger benefit that these animals now are able to face challenges better in the environment than animals that don't have these mechanisms. It's like the immediate mechanism that we see today because it's given a survival benefit to those populations. I'm sorry, I'm trying to quickly explain this, but yeah. So the elephant calf mother. So elephant calves can die of disease. There are different reasons that elephant calves can also die, although predation is not as big a factor. And I think these mother calf bonds are the immediate way that calves are then kept safe and they survive better.
Good evening. How long did this film take to make? And during in this duration that you were filming, I'm sure you studied individuals as you had Dia, was it? Or, yeah. And so, did you notice any individualistic behavioral traits in Blackbuck?
Thanks. Interesting. Yes, I mean, we took about 2.5 years to finish filming across the landscape, and we did see many individual traits. And it came along with how they behaved to versus how they reacted to different scenarios. So there were these males which there was this one particular male which would take a liking to us. So he wouldn't be scared of us, and he would just walk past us without even giving a second look towards us. But there was other males which wouldn't do that. So we did see that there were individuals which had which probably for whatever odd reasons showed not much fear towards us, and there were individuals who were scared of us, and there would be these individuals which would like the one with the broken horn. He was a lot more how do I say, like a lot more aggressive compared to the other males, and he was a lot more forthcoming. He would even challenge us at times, like if he was sitting at and he would just be snickering at us and showing off that he didn't really like us being there, like that. So yes, we did see individual behavior.
Yeah, again, amazing documentary. Thanks for making it.
Thanks.
I have just I think, been very insightful questions so far. I think mine's just a lot lighter. I think it's one for both of you. As a wildlife filmmaker, is there a specific animal that's on your bucket list that you'd love to film? And you mentioned you did your PhD on black bucks. What was the specific reason why you chose that specific animal?
I mean, we have 45,000 plus species in India. So I'd love to film all of them, frankly. And in fact, like we were just saying, is like the intention behind making films like this came from the fact that, like the moment we talk about Indian wildlife on a mainstream film, we get to see the same 4 or 5 species, right? But we are such a rich country. So the idea behind films like this is that we want to showcase the biodiversity, the richness of our country, by not just concentrating on the charismatic species, but also on other species which play an important role in making what our country is our country. And also the fact is that, like while at one point it is important that we want to showcase this beautiful natural history behavior to people about it, it is also important for the fact is that, unless our own people know about what exists in our landscape, it's very hard for conservation is a long shot. So this very early in my life, when I was volunteering with organizations, there was this one particular survey that I took part in, and we were in the Biligiri Rangan Hills area, and we were carrying these little uh, uh, photo books, and we were to show these pictures of these animals to the people living around the forest and ask them as to what they identified to understand what the human wildlife conflict was. So one of the things that we really saw that people would misidentify a lot of these animals, but they would know things about like why weren't there giraffes in our forest, why weren't there like lions in our forests, or why were there and they would misidentify a langur to a orangutan. So what drove my curiosity was like, how did these people living on the boundaries of these forests did not know animals which they actually would come across on a regular basis, but knew about animals like an orangutan or whatever else. So when we dug deep, we realized that TV, the mainstream shows were actually showing these animals. Like you get to whenever you see any BBC or National Geographic films, you only get to see a lot of wildlife from the Africa or from the Amazon. So they were fed with a lot of these animals, and that is what they knew. And if ever they knew anything about Indian wildlife, was just about tigers, elephants, and leopards. That is where it ended. And a partial reference to a rhinoceros somewhere or a hornbill somewhere is all that we know of Indian wildlife. So this idea that we want to showcase a lot of our Indian biodiversity, which is fantastic, which is as beautiful as any of these animals, was what drove me to make this film and other films that I have made. So yes, I'd like to shoot all the 45,000 given an opportunity.
Uh, I'm a behavioral ecologist. So what I enjoy, what I'm very curious about is trying to figure out what, if animals have these common challenges, how to find food, how to avoid being eaten, how to find mates, how many offspring children to have, how big to make each child, how much to put into each child, and so on. But different animals have found very different solutions for the same challenges. So, as behavioral ecologist, I was really interested in trying to find out what are the conditions because of which this solution has evolved here, and what are the ecological conditions that has now led to a different solution in a different area. And Blackbuck is perfect for that kind of study, because if you want to study behavior, rainforests are beautiful, but you can't see the animals. So, doing behavior is very challenging in a rainforest, however beautiful rainforests are. Open natural ecosystems are great because you can watch animals well. Blackbuck had this really fascinating both social behavior and the way they find mates. So social behavior wise, they can be all the way alone, groups of 2, 3, all the way to 500, 600. So if we want to know why do you see solitary individuals in one place but large groups in another place, why have they evolved these very different ways of moving in different areas, Blackbuck is great because it has that variation. So because it's got that interesting behavior found across a wide range of ecological conditions, it was very fascinating.
I have two questions, one for you and one for Sanjay sir. So you expressed concern that diseases could spread to the black bucks because of feral dogs. But the, okay. You expressed a concern that diseases could spread to the black bucks because of feral dogs.
Blackbuck, actually, I meant with the wolves and jackals, actually.
Okay.
Not to blackbuck, not to blackbuck.
Okay. So my question was on the land being shared between the sheep and blackbucks. Do you see any sort of risk to the blackbuck population because of sheep which is in contact with humans and then blackbucks?
It is possible. We don't know enough, unfortunately. So, disease ecology is kind of still in a very young stage in India. We know that in these African savannas, where antelope are often found with either cattle or sheep and goat, there you can have disease kind of outbreaks. So, but here we don't know much. On the other hand, I think Sanjay had also mentioned it. Cattle and blackbuck, in many ways, livestock can actually facilitate blackbuck populations by keeping the grassland kind of mowed down. So blackbuck are selective grazers. They like eating fairly tender grass shoots. And if a grassland is not grazed at all, the grass can get really coarse. And that blackbuck are not very good feeding on. They're not very good with that. So when you have some level of livestock grazing, the nutritional level in the grasses tends to be higher and blackbuck can benefit. So it's a complicated situation and we really need to know much more about it.
Thank you. Question to Sanjay sir. What is keeping the blackbuck population under control? Wolves possibly aren't so great in number. Are there other predators feeding on the blackbucks?
I don't know much about this, but I can say, there's a lot of poaching that's happening across the state. If you go to places like Ranebennur, Haveri, it's not just the meat. You'll see a lot of auto rickshaws with the blackbuck horn on it. So there's a lot of blackbuck poaching across the state, on the drier plains, because conservation awareness is also less, and also forest department thinks poaching needs to be controlled only in protected areas and only about species which are more charismatic. So I think humans are a big impact, but I think the more critical thing is the loss of habitat. Like Kavita also mentioned earlier, that we don't have natural grasslands left anymore in large vast stretches. Agriculture is a big thing, of course, and nowadays even dry area agriculture, which used to be about pulses, about other kinds of millets, has all converted into not just solar farms but also into maize. There's a huge amount of shift in our cultivating pattern from millets and pulses to maize, which is much more industrial production. So I think maize is a serious problem for blackbucks, according to me, across the state. I keep traveling in the northern parts of Karnataka now. What I used to see in the 80s, 90s is completely different now. So maize has taken over commercial production of maize. So I think maize is a much more serious threat for blackbucks.